because we've got to get into the big win. It was a big day for Oklahoma football yesterday. The big emphatic 26-7 win over the South Carolina Gamecocks in Columbia made it a little bit sweeter for Oklahoma fans to know that Oklahoma not only now has 2 wins in SEC play, but you got one on the road. So you've got to take some of these road games. This was one that you really had to have. This is one that, especially with South Carolina not being the South Carolina team that a lot of people thought that they would be this season, this was the one that Oklahoma really needed when it came to when it came down to it. You really needed Oklahoma to have this win because you just lost to Texas the week before. You had to bounce back and get right, and you did it. You did it against South Carolina in South Carolina. And really made a statement on both sides at Williams-Brice Stadium there in Columbia. But of course, before we get to the end of the episode, we even have to talk a little bit about Ole Miss because we're starting to look ahead now. It's already a new week. It's Sunday, which means Saturday is already gone. You got to shake off the win and move on to the next one. Ole Miss ended up dropping their game, but still a very hard-fought game against Georgia, and they proved that they're going to be a very tough opponent for homecoming for Oklahoma this upcoming Saturday. So we'll get to all of that and much more. But first, starting off with the good news of Oklahoma taking down South Carolina. Being able to take down a good opponent, definitely a solid opponent. I wouldn't say that South Carolina's any good. So this is something that I put out there on social media yesterday, is that I believe that South Carolina and Auburn are very comparable. When you look at the two teams right now, obviously I think they've got different weaknesses, different strengths, but I think just overall greatness, how good they are this year, so overall goodness, I suppose you might say, I think they're both comparable programs. So if that's the case right now anyways, this season, I think they're both very comparable. If that's the case, I feel like Oklahoma's improved. If they aren't comparable, then I don't know. I guess it's just up in the air. You can take it for what it's worth. I think Oklahoma showed some major improvement. And to start off with the most encouraging talking point for the Sooners and what they had, I think it was a big day on the run game, the big day on the ground, being able to finally establish some sort of legitimate rushing attack against a legitimate opponent. I think that was really crucial for the Oklahoma Sooners. We had been talking about it all week. I think a lot of fans were ready to see that run game going all week, but I think that it needs to keep on going. It can't just stop with South Carolina. You can't just have a good day against South Carolina and then shake it off. But the Sooners ended up rushing for 171 total yards on 40 carries against South Carolina. And honestly, it wasn't even a close game because of the run game. So it was definitely the best game that this Oklahoma Sooners team has had on the ground all season long. So definitely big stuff. Torrey Blaylock, he had a breakout performance. I don't really know if you call it a breakout performance because I think we already knew that he was the guy. It's just that he hasn't really been given the chance to show that off. And he was given the chance yesterday, and he ended up doing just that. He ends up having 101 rushing yards on a career high, tying his career high, season high. And, so a big time day for him. He also got himself a touchdown and 19 carries. The thing with Torrey Blaylock, too, is that he set the tone early for Oklahoma. There was a second and very long, I believe that was 2nd and 20. He ends up getting an 18-yard run because of the penalty. So second and 20, big-time 18-yard run to set up 3rd and short for the Sooners. They end up marching it down there, getting down for a touchdown that was closed off and sealed by Torrey Blaylock himself with another 18-yard run to get into the end zone. So 2 18-yard runs. He ends up, kind of getting the Sooners back into position where they needed to be, and then getting it down there inside the red zone, scores on that big-time run. So, it was just a 75-yard drive that was 50 yards, I believe. 50 yards of that first opening drive was all Torrey Blaylock. And so, just a huge day for him, especially starting off that early, getting yourselves to a 7-0 lead, to 7-0 lead that just felt like that was the drive that you needed to open with to not just win this game, but feel good about how you won this game. So Torrey Blaylock, absolutely. That was his second 100-yard rushing game this season. Also, so most rushing yards by a running back this season, tied by himself, Torrey Blaylock. He is the guy. And it was also the most rushing yards, and I posted this last night. It was the most rushing yards that an Oklahoma running back has had at Oklahoma since Xavier Robinson against Alabama last season. And it goes back even further than that, into the 2023 season, before an Oklahoma running back has had over 100 yards. So, I mean, this was a big performance. It was a much needed performance. It was one that you can look at the Temple game and say, hey, Torrey Blaylock had a big game there. He now just ties the rushing yards that he had there. And so, we already had this from him. We already knew this, but he does this against a Power 4 opponent, and not just against a Power 4 opponent, but then against an SEC opponent. Much needed for the Oklahoma Sooners. Very much needed. So Torrey Blaylock, obviously one of the big players in this game, a crucial moment for him in this game and a crucial moment for this offense as they were able to get that run game going. And then, even after the game, Blaylock, whenever he was asked about it, he gave a lot of credit to the line, and specifically against, he gave a lot of that credit to Fabechi Wiwu and some of the things that he had been doing all week. So, that was really big to see from Torrey Blaylock, a big game, and then the leadership afterwards to not just take the credit for himself, but to point out that who it really was that got him going. And the offensive line, we'll get to that. They did do much better in this game in many ways, and so we'll talk to that. We'll also critique that a little bit, not criticize, but to critique that just a little bit as well. The other running back that got going was sophomore Xavier Robinson, X-Rob. He provided really the perfect complement and really proved that we've got that 1-2 punch in two young guys in the backfield, and that is Xavier Robinson, Torrey Blaylock being the number one, and Xavier Robinson. It's just obvious at this point that you're not going to get Jaden not going. I don't have anything confirmed on what's going on there with Javonte Barnes. I know that the whole injury situation last week, I still feel like we might not see Javonte Barnes play another game this season for the Oklahoma Sooners, as well as several other players, but we'll probably get to some of that this week. But for Xavier Robinson, a big-time game for him as well. Just over 5 yards per carry, 58 yards and a touchdown on 11 carries. So a really big game from him. Again, you get these running backs into rhythm, and this is the kind of stuff that will happen for the Oklahoma Sooners. You get them into a rhythm. You have to give them the ball, feed them the ball, and get them going downhill. Get them feeling some sort of purpose, and get them feeling some sort of what's the word I'm looking for? Get them feeling that momentum rolling, and get them into the game. And that's how you get these running backs going. So it's really crucial for the running backs to get going. Blaylock and Robinson combined for 159 yards total of the 171 yards. That is the biggest running back game that Oklahoma has really had, especially against a Power 4 opponent, because I think it's not really fair to try to compare to maybe what they did against Temple this year, or even going back to Maine last year. That's not the standard at Oklahoma. The standard is, can you do that against a Power 4 opponent? Can you do that against an SEC opponent? And to do it on the road, I think that was definitely, and I see in the chat, thanks, that's what I need. Get them that momentum, get them that energy, get them rolling downhill. That's what these running backs need, and that's exactly what they got today. So Xavier Robinson, Torrey Blaylock, huge day for both of them, huge day for the running back room, huge day for the offense, getting that running game going and getting them looking truly, with a true attack, with an honest attack there in the run game, and give some true balance to this offense. I think that was extremely crucial for Oklahoma. Going over to the offensive line, because you can't leave those big guys out when you talk about the run game. The offensive line helped with this run game tremendously. They delivered really, I think, their best run blocking performance of the season, and it still has a lot of improvement, obviously. And so I don't want us to look at this and act as if it's all fixed because the South Carolina defensive front was really weak. And on top of that, they were without one of their best in Dylan Stewart for most of the game. So that is something to take into consideration. That is kind of my critique about how the offensive line performed. I don't think that you look at the offensive line and just say that, hey, there's too much to fix, that they're completely gone, because they showed some promise in this game and they showed what they're capable of. And they're still doing that against, a D1, an SEC defensive line, which is really important. So, I think that's extremely important to point out for this offensive line. They had a good game. Now, not to get too full on them because they still have a lot of improvement, and they didn't have a good game against, say, I don't know who's a really good. Texas was probably one of the best defensive lines that Oklahoma is going to go against this year. I'm trying to think of who else might be better. And, I think you're going to have a lot of comparable defensive lines here coming up. Tennessee is going to be pretty tough. That's going to be a tough one. Alabama, I think there's some weaknesses there that you can have this kind of a game against. I really do. Even LSU, I think they show some weaknesses. I think that'll be another very tough one. But anyways, very good game from this offensive line, being able to look really solid against that South Carolina defensive front. Oklahoma rushed for 50 yards on that opening drive, all by Torrey Blaylock. Big time opening drive, and that's more than they managed the entire game against Texas. So they were able to do more in that opening drive than they could against Texas. And so again, I know you're kind of comparing two teams that aren't the same, and Texas performed really well against Oklahoma in that Red River rivalry, but I think you can still take away the positives from this. And to look at over 100 yards rushing at halftime for the Sooners. That was right around 136 rushing yards at halftime. So ultimately, this rushing performance really kind of marks that defining game for Oklahoma to get things turned around. And, historically, Oklahoma has been known to do this. Now, I don't know why they have to wait until week 6, 7, or 8 to do it, but now in week 8, they finally get something going in the run game against a very worthy opponent. And I think that's historically what happens for Oklahoma. You get that one game that gets the run game going, and then all of a sudden you've got more of a balanced attack. And it's happened many times. We can think of this many times where you go into the Red River rivalry not really sure about this Oklahoma run game, and then all of a sudden it turns on, and the rest of the season things are going well for them. It's happened many times. Think back to like the Jalen Hurts days. Even back before that, I think even like when we had guys like Dominic Williams with the big time run, and he just had an amazing season after that. Even DeMarco Murray, I feel like DeMarco Murray was one of the backs too that had a really big game there against Texas and then turns it on in the rest of the season. Could this be that kind of a game for Oklahoma where their run game turns it on against a really good opponent, maybe too late into the season, but still nonetheless turns on the run game against a good opponent, and they're able to kind of turn things around there on out? I really hope that's the case. I don't have a lot of confidence in that being the case, but it very well could be, and the Oklahoma Sooners finally get that run game going against South Carolina here in Week 8.